Groove. Come journey with us through the rhythm of the music business with your host, Jackie Bertoni.
Everybody, welcome to Jackie's Groove. Hey, guys, it's Jackie Bertoni, brought to you by the Intertalk Radio Network. It is Wednesday the 22nd, a little bit cloudy here in California, but we're going to brighten up the day because I got to tell you, in my studio today is an amazing guitarist. The one you just heard at the top of the show, the voice and guitar licks of the incomparable and the mesmerizing playing of Mr. Richie Kotzen. So with that said, everybody, I want everybody to welcome with open arms and open ears to Jackie's Groove, Mr. Richie Kotzen. Richie, welcome, my brother. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Man, you know what? It's early for musicians, but I do appreciate you taking the opportunity just to shed a little bit of light on your career with my listeners worldwide. And so with that, let's kick it off, brother, and let's just talk about that tune we started out with. You want to talk about it and kind of give the background on it?
Yeah, well, that is the opening track for my new studio record, Salting Earth. And it's a newer song that I've written. It's interesting how I write, because I don't ever really get into a mode where I write everything at the same time. You know, it's kind of comes in pieces, and I kind of document ideas. But that was something that I started writing last year, and along with 3 or 4 other songs that ended up on the record. And so after I had everything finished, and I decided what songs were actually going to live on the record, somehow that just seemed to make sense to open the record. And I guess the biggest problem I had was trying to decide what to call the album. The titles are always tricky. But in that song, there's a lyric where I say, "I'm salting a bit of earth." And then somehow I thought, yeah, that's the title of the album. So the title of the album kind of came out of a lyric of that song, and once all the songs were ready, that was just, for me, the obvious opener for the album.
Richie, with that said, who are the players on that album? Who played on that tune itself?
The bass player is this guy named Richie Kotzen. The drummer is a fellow from Pennsylvania by the name of Richie Kotzen, and obviously, I'm playing guitar and singing, and my name is Richie Kotzen as well.
It's a beautiful. We just should call the album Sybil, man. You know, because you got all those different personalities going on there. Hey, brother, I had no idea, man. You chopped it up like that, man. Congratulations. And it cuts back on the bitching out the players, and also cuts back on the revenue expenditure. So beautiful, man.
Yeah,
I love it. Was that done?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Was that done?
No, I mean, was that what's? Well, go ahead. No, go ahead. We got a little bit of a delay here, but it's your show. Go ahead and ask away.
Well, the process is kind of interesting, you know, because I get people asking about that. Well, why are you the only musician on your album? You know, and It's not really that deliberate. It just kind of happens that way because of by the nature of how I work. So when I had, and I recently moved, so I don't have a studio anymore in my home. I will eventually, but at the moment I don't. But for 20 years I had a studio, and so the way it was set up was that all the instruments were always mic'd at all times, and that signal chain in the studio never came undone. So if I had my drum set in a corner, that was always mic'd up with the same microphones and preamps, and the bass rig the guitar rig, or actually a couple guitar rigs, my vocal mic and signal chain. They're always ready to go. So at any moment, I can go in and work on ideas. And I can go back at any moment and replace things. So, for example, with that song that you were playing, I did the original drum track, and then as I was building the song, I would go back and say, yeah, that's really cool, but in the second pre-chorus, I want to add another drum fill. So I could go back a week later, and as long as the drums were in tune, I could punch in and do a different drum fill. And so it's just kind of the way I work, and over the course of time, you end up with a finished piece of music or a recording. And I've always worked that way. It's convenient for me. I have had guys play on my records, and so I'm not opposed to that. I actually like it in the right circumstances. But sometimes when I record, if I get a situation where I have a song that I wrote and it sounds finished to me, and I happened to be the guy that played drums and bass and whatever, and if it sounds finished and I'm listening to it come out of the speakers and I'm loving it and it sounds like what I heard in my head, I'm not going to go back and fiddle around with other versions of it. It doesn't make sense to me. It makes more sense to move on and write something else. So it just comes out that way. When it feels done, it's done. And then if it's something that I can't really execute and get finished, then I'll call someone and say, hey, can you come in and play drums on this for me, or can you come in and do a keyboard track or whatever.
Okay, well, Richie, let me ask you this question. Is Richie Kotzen an easy guy to work with, or is he a prick?
Everybody says I'm really, really easy to work with, but, I'm working, a lot of the times I'm working alone, and so then what happens is I have a finished record. So, like, for example, Salting Earth. So I forward the music to my band, and we've been playing together now for almost 6 years. And so they learn the material. And then we get into the rehearsal room. And even yesterday, we actually started rehearsing 2 days ago. So we were rehearsing, and the other day, my drummer, Mike, would make a suggestion. He said, I'm hearing this or that. And I listen to it. Sometimes, a lot of the time, we change things. And
right.
Good to do that, because when you look at something like a studio recording, like, for example, the song Cannonball on the new record, there's a lot of production things happening. It starts off with a drum machine, then the real drums come in, there's guitar lines with the electric piano, then there's a guitar solo at the end with the electric piano, a lot of vocals are happening. We're only 3 guys, so we're not going to be able to duplicate the record the way it is recorded, and we don't really intend to either. So we rearranged some things. So for that song, for example, we came up with some cool things that made it work for a trio, and that comes out of being able to work with the other guys. I think the key is this. The key is to pick people to play with that play instinctively in a way that complements your music. So Dylan Wilson, as a bass player, plays my music the way I want to hear it played, and the same thing with Mike Bennett. So that becomes very easy. It eliminates a lot of conflict, as opposed to playing with somebody who doesn't hear music the way you do. Then perhaps it could become unpleasant.
Yeah, and I asked that question, man, because you and I do have a friend in common, Mike Bennett, your drummer. Mike and I go back 20 years. I asked that question because Michael's, he says to me, man, you're the salt of the earth, man. He goes, he's intense. His complexity in his playing is awe-inspiring, and he learns from it, as we all learn from someone when we play with somebody of the caliber of Richie Kotzen. And Richie, I want to ask you a question if I can, because listeners want to know about this. I mean, here you are, you're a young cat still. I mean, you were born February 3rd, 1970 in Reading, Pennsylvania. Correct me if I'm wrong. And when you started out back then, was the guitar the first instrument that beckoned you, or were there other instruments that you picked up and toyed with first?
Actually, it's Reading, Pennsylvania. You were right the first time.
Perfect.
It's interesting how it happened. I was one of those kids that liked to kind of entertain my family, and so I'll never forget. We had a room in our house that was like kind of I guess you'd call it a rec room, you know, where the TV and the fireplace were, and a pool table in there and that sort of thing. And it was kind of like a multi-leveled room. So like you had one level where like the pool table was, and then you'd step down to where the sofa was. And I would always stand on that little ledge with a microphone stand and a plastic guitar and dress up in crazy costumes. You know, I'd put on my mom's wigs and try to put, she had these crazy boots that she wore back then that reminded me of like Gene Simmons or Paul Stanley boots. So I'd try to put those on and pretend I was somebody from Kiss and entertain the family. And I was really, really little. And then eventually somebody suggested that I take piano lessons because there was a piano in the house. So I might have been 5 or 6 when I started the piano lessons, and I didn't really love it. You know, I liked the idea of music, but I didn't like going to the teacher's house, and there was nothing cool or exciting about it. And then about a year later, I found a guitar at a yard sale, and then I realized, that's what I want to do, and it kind of reminded me of Kiss, and you know, those guys holding guitars and dressing up and being cool and crazy and rock out. So that's kind of how I got into the guitar. And then I really was obsessed with the guitar for about 3 or 4 years, like from like, I don't know, from like 14, 15, 16, 17, that era of my life. I was just all about like learning as much as I could on the guitar, and really more in a hard rock thing. You know, I'd listen to Eddie Van Halen and Steve Vai and those kind of players. And then somewhere along the line, I realized that I really wanted to do some, you know, I wanted to do something more than just learn the instrument. And I started trying to write my own songs. And so my focus kind of shifted in my late teens, more from being like a guitar player to being a singer and a songwriter. And so then it kind of all off. So I think what really happened to me, I didn't really find my voice as a player until my like very early 20s, like around 19, 20, 21 years old. Around that time, I kind of started figuring out who I was. And I, you know, once I started singing and writing songs, my guitar playing evolved without even really having to practice. It just changed. It just became more musical. And I had already had a lot of facility on the instrument from the very young teenage years of practicing all the time. So then I was able to apply some more musicality to what I was doing, you know. So
well, let me ask you this question. In 2007, in 2017, Richie, have you found yourself yet? Would you? I mean, I'm being honest with that. Have you found? Are you comfortable where you're at?
Oh, I've been comfortable way longer before that. I mean, I was kind of knew where I was in the early 90s. You know, I think by the time, you know, what happened, it was kind of funny. When I was 19, I got signed to Interscope, and I was kind of poised to really have a great machine behind me. And I wanted to do what I'm doing now. So I kind of knew at like 19 what I wanted to be doing. And so I was writing these songs, and the label was getting frustrated because I was writing these kind of soulful R&B kind of tunes, and they really wanted me to be a heavy metal guy, and I wanted nothing to do with that. And so then a year in LA, finally we had agreed on something. We were picking songs, and we had Danny Korchmar was going to produce my record. I don't know if you know who he is, but he was involved in Don Henley's End of the Innocents. I loved that album, and I loved Danny's work, and I was so excited. I was at his house in Santa Monica. We were picking songs. Everything was ready to go. And at the last minute, the label pulled the plug and said, we don't want you making this kind of a record. And I flipped out. I was like, you guys don't know what you're doing with me. You have no idea what I do, what I am, what I'm about. You want me to be this, you know, heavy metal dude that I'm not. You know, I don't listen to heavy metal. I'm not in that world, in my mind, in my writing. So to answer your question, I knew who I was back then, you know, more than 20 years ago, because I pretty much told the labels, like, either we make this record or you guys can drop me. I'm not going to make the record you want me to make. And guess what they did? They dropped me. They dropped me from the deal. And the most ironic thing happened. After me kicking and screaming that I am not going to participate in the world of heavy metal, I turned around and joined a pop metal band, Poison. So it was just the most insane thing that happened. I lost my record deal. And then suddenly I was approached by Bret Michaels to join Poison. And it just seemed so crazy, but I thought, well, I'm going to at least go meet him. And so I went out to his house in Calabasas, and I actually really got a great feeling from him. I really liked him. And what I really liked was him telling me that they wanted to go in a different direction, and that if I was in the band, I would be a band member, and I would be writing songs with them. So what ended up happening is we made what I think was a really, really cool record that had a lot of elements, music that it was exciting to me. We had elements of soul and R&B, but then it still rocked, and it was kind of fun. We had Sheila E. on the record. We had the South Central AME Church Choir on the record. Piano player from Leonard Skinner was on the record. We made a really cool record. So it kind of made sense in the end, but this is a long-winded answer. But yeah, I've kind of known who I was for a long time.
No, and it's not a long-winded answer. What the thing sucks about this whole thing, Richie, is that you and I met for the first time just about 20 minutes ago, and I've been familiar and a fan of your music for so long. But the difference between these interviews versus the other interviews, the thousands that you've done, is that this is between musicians and musician. And thanks to your publicist, and I say this with tongue in cheek, there's no way we can get into your career in a 30-minute fucking interview, man. I mean, it's like there's just so much to go on. I mean, and I'm dead serious, and I want to leave an open invitation like I do with everybody who takes a shorter interview. The doors are wide open here at Intertalk Radio and Jackie's Groove, man, because you and I need to chop it up. Think about this, man. Your tenure with the Winery Dogs, Mr. Big, Poison, and your correlation with my buddy Stanley Clarke. I mean, and the fact that you fucking walked onto the stage and opened up for the Stones in 2006, that alone is 2 hours of a conversation. Wanted to find out more about that. So, with that said, I want you to take this as an open invitation. You and I have got to chop it up, brother, for a long interview, because the listeners out there, this is a tease, brother. This is absolute tease and not fair to the listeners and your fans. So with that said, I definitely want to go ahead and extend the olive branch. Would you take and accept another invitation to come back on for a longer term?
Yeah, and let's do that. And, just let me know, or let us know when we can do that. And I would love to do that. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, man. Yeah, because right now we're looking at all the feeds right now for people wanting to know 1,000 different informations. And there's one thing Jackie doesn't do. I don't ask a question and that requires an hour response when there's only 30 seconds left in the venue itself. So, but let's go back on here for a second. I want to tell you about this. Again, one of my very dear friends of mine is great guitar player. His name is Salvador Spinelli, an amazing guitarist in his own right. He's the one that always lives out here in Temecula, where my studio is. But he always makes that pilgrimage out to the Baked Potato. And my God, how many times have we played there or filled our stomach up with potatoes, or Carl's Jr. across the street? But he called me one day, man.
I love that pitch.
Yeah, man. But he called me up one night, man. He said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What, man? You sat in with Richie?" He says, "Oh, no, not even close." But he goes, "I did get a chance to bring and help with his rig." And let me just tell you, Richie, from Sal Spinelli to myself, thank you, man. You made his career, man. He actually had a chance to carry in your guitar and carry in your amp. So, Sal, if you're listening out there, I thought I would throw that plug there,
God. Man. Well, right on.
Yeah,
it's funny. That place, Baked Potato, has been such a part of my life. I remember when I moved to Los Angeles in 1990, one of the first places I went was the Potato, and I became friends with Steve Lukather somehow. And I don't remember if I went to see him play there or if or he was there, but we ended up connecting. And then I remember going up to his house a few days later, but then now fast forward in recent times, I've played there so much, and I used to live for 20 years, more than 20 years. I lived up in the hill behind the Baked Potato, so I would do gigs there and kind of stumble down the hill and then go back up and have like after parties and hang out. And it was such a cool thing. I actually moved now out of L.A., so I don't miss anything about where I used to live, with the exception of the proximity to the baked potato. It's the only thing I miss.
And that thing with I guarantee you the fact that you were watching Luke, because Luke there's my good friend, and I used to sit in with the guys all the time with their band, along with Lenny Castro and Carlos Vega, and Marco Mendoza, depending on who was playing at the time, Mike Beccaro, and with a small group called Toto. And the group they were going under, the name they were going under, was Los Lobotomies. So I don't know if that kind of rings a bell to you at all.
Of course, I remember.
And so that was it. And I was walking in because, look, I'm 10 years your senior. I've been going to the baked potato when I was 18 years old. So if the Randy family's out there listening, yes, I did break the law. I did walk in, but that's the benefit of being Italian. You can have a beard at the age of 17 and 18. You can walk in there, and believe me, I cut my teeth at that club, and I would go there and I would listen to the people you just mentioned. And there's still great talents, because you know what? It's sad, though. Think about it, Richie. There's so many great fucking venues that have closed the doors. There's nothing out there anymore. The longevity of the baked potato. But what are the small clubs out there that we can play? Batalos, unless you're playing jazz. It's a sad situation, man.
I don't know. Yeah, it's true.
I'm gonna be redundant, and I'm gonna ask this question because right now we've only got another 7 minutes. But do me a favor. I don't want to get political by any stretch of the imagination. But since you are a road dog, you've been in this industry for so fucking long. You've seen it change. It changes daily. But I want to ask Richie Kotzen a question. All three Richie Kotzens: the bass player, the guitar player, and the drummer. With that said, what is your overall feeling about the music industry, the music business, or the lack thereof? Tell the listeners.
Well, it's going to probably be a surprise, but I'm fine with it. I really am. And the reason I say that, well, yeah, here's why. Because all when you look at over the course of time, it's always changing. It's always evolving. And anyone that gets to my age, that grew up on a certain kind of music, always looks at what's happening in the time as garbage. It's just, imagine if you're a kid back in the 80s and you're listening to Judas Priest, and then, your parents are like, what is this racket? This isn't real music. Listen, and then they play you what they grew up listening to. So, you do have that thing that churns. Also, I don't think it's necessary to live in the past. I think the bands that I loved, that I grew up listening to, I still can listen to them. I can still put on the Eagles. I can still listen to Led Zeppelin. And a lot of these great, great artists were great because of what was happening at that time. And as they get older, some of them continue to make music, but it's never has the magic that the records had back then. Because there was something happening back then around them in their lives. Things were new, fresh. They were younger. Whatever it is, their experiences, they were becoming who they were. So all those special things are documented. They exist. And now things have changed. Everything has changed. Young people, music doesn't necessarily mean what it meant to us because they have other things that fill the void. There's so many other things. You still do have young people making great music. They're out there. There's not probably as many as there used to be, but they are doing cool things. My daughter is an artist. She writes and records music, and she's writing things that I'm, and not just because she's my daughter, but I'm really impressed. Like, where are you getting this from? She's going back listening to music from the 50s and 60s, and that's kind of coming into her stuff. And it has this kind of crazy sound that sounds like different to me. Like I never really heard that before. So I still think there's great music out there, but how boring would it be if Led Zeppelin and or even great bands from the 80s, if that was still the norm? That would mean that we didn't really move from that period of time, and it makes sense that the older guys don't like it because older people have always not liked what young people like. They're not young. They don't understand what's happening. So
I love that response though, Richie, because the bottom line is, man, I mean, you've been in this business long enough, and I'm kind of shocked at your response. Not a bad shock, but just the fact of the matter is I thought maybe you'd be a little more hardcore excuse the French out there, the shit that is playing in the airwaves. I mean, I don't get it. I don't want to show my age.
Here's the deal. I could easily live in that hateful, bitter world. That's not going to help me and my creativity. First of all, I'm better off listening to that stuff, and the stuff I don't like, I can recognize, okay, I don't like that, but there's other things that I do like. You know, I'll tell you something. I love what Bruno Mars has been doing lately. Now, I know that all this stuff, all those records, the 24 Karat and this one and that one, it's all stuff we've heard before. We've heard it all before. And he's borrowing and spinning it in a different way. But thank God he is, because he's showing the young people something really cool that I heard, you know, the original guys doing when I was a kid with the Gap Band or Parliament Funkadelic or all that stuff. You know, I grew up outside of Philly, so I was all about R&B and that kind of music, funk and soul. So I love it. I love that there's people out there that are still making that exist in the mainstream. Pharrell making that, you know, even though it's nothing new, it's not original, but it's done in a slick way that young people can think, oh, what is this? You know, they think that those guys invented it, but who cares what they think? At least that style and that sound is still being celebrated, you know?
Hey, Richie, last 2 minutes. Let me just throw something back at you. A magical day in history called April 26th. I'm going to boast and blow smoke on my own ass. That's my birthday. And that April 26th is also a gig you got coming up at Brick by Brick. So with that said, as that red light is flashing, what I want to do for you, and I'll have my people call your people. How does that for Bullshit Hollywood? And I want to help you out like we did with Al Di Meola. I want to help promote the Brick by Brick gig with Richie Kotzen. So we'll talk more about that offline, man. But I want to make sure that you know we're going to be there with you every step of the way of your 8 p.m. show at Brick by Brick. We'll talk more about that. But at 11:57, Richie, I hate to say this, man, but bro, this half hour blew by, and I will get you guys, my guys, to get you back on prior to the show. Let's chop it up for a full 2 hours. So with that said, hey, Richie, I don't want to blow you off, man, but I got a girl by the name of Ann Wilson coming up next. So I'm going to bid you adieu, my brother. Thank you so much for the listeners out there. Everybody, say thank you and say goodbye, and God bless to Mr. Richie Kotzen ×3, bass player, guitar player, and drummer. Richie, I love you, brother. Godspeed, and we will talk to you probably in the next 24 to 48 hours and get things locked up. I hope you had a good time. I hope you're going to come back. All right, brother. God bless, man.
Bye.
Rock on, brother. Rock on.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbear.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.